Okay, Madam Clerk, is your recorder ready to roll?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That being the case, I'll call to order the Monday, August 25th, 2014 regular meeting of the Town of Pittsboro Board of Commissioners and ask for a moment of silence. Thank you. Mr. Farrell, please start.
Everyone rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, here, before we get started, I want to sort out that we do have one agenda change. The manager's provided us with an agenda with a yellow highlighted change on the back. And this was an omission that he corrected over the weekend, adding as new business the Chatham County Planning presentation. So when we approve the agenda, I'll be speaking to the one that's got the yellow highlighting on the back. That's the one I'll be asking you to approve. And with that, we'll go to the consent agenda, which I see has four items on it. The approval of the August 11th meeting minutes, approving the sidewalk agreement with NCDOT for construction along sidewalk construction along Pittsboro Elementary School Road, authorization to execute appointment of the Unified Development Ordinance Technical Advisory Committee. And Commissioner Baldwin has one suggestion about that. I think we can leave it on the consent agenda after we hear her suggestion. And then the fourth item is accepting a certificate of sufficiency for proposed annexation from Chatham Park. And Commissioner Baldwin, do you want to make your suggestion before we act on the consent agenda?
Yes, please. Thank you, Mayor. I would like to add or ask Becky Smith at Hydro Structures if she would be on that technical advisory committee. And I would like if our manager would contact her to see if she would be able to do that. That would be wonderful.
The board generally agree that's a good idea?
Yes.
Okay. I think we can proceed to establish the committee tonight with the folks named there and then invite Ms. Smith to join after we ask her rather than just draft her without her volunteering.
Just a point of reference, I mean, in all likelihood, she'll be serving as a professional employee, that's not necessarily, unless she doesn't, of course. But,
Can I ask those?
I mean, you see what I'm getting at.
Yes.
She's a citizen, however,
Yes.
I think her scope of knowledge is professional.
Well, why don't you ask her to sit on the committee under the same status with all the other members who are also, some of them are professionals in the community, like Mr. Attorney Bradshaw, but they're not going to charge it. And as a long-term resident of town, perhaps she will be willing to do that.
And she has a knowledge not only in stormwater, wastewater, she's also got an electrical engineering degree, so she has a lot of talents.
Let's first see if she'll accept that role as a citizen.
I just have one minor correction to the minutes, just a typo. Beth Foley instead of Beth Foley.
Just I said Beth Foley instead of Beth on one page.
That's close.
Okay. Any other changes? Anyone want to pull anything or amend anything on the consent agenda?
I would like to pull the sidewalk just because I've got a couple of questions about it. I support it, but I'm curious about some of the numbers associated with it. So I'd like to pull that.
So we'll put that under, let's see, we don't have any old business. I guess we'll have that as old business number one.
Yeah.
Okay, with those, the removal of item 2 and the instructions regarding item 3, do I hear a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the consent agenda as modified is adopted. And now we need to, let's see here, with respect to citizen matters, the clerk tells me we have nobody registered signed to speak, so we can skip over that. Now we need to approve the other agenda, and again, I'm speaking about the one with the yellow highlighting, which does have new business number 1 of this Gather County Planning presentation by Mr. Sullivan. Do we have any changes to the agenda other than that? Did I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The agenda is approved as modified. And our first order of business is a public hearing on the Board of Adjustment statutory changes. And Mr. Bass is going to introduce this. Do you want to go ahead and say a few words, even though nobody has signed up to speak at this public hearing?
Yes, sir. This is a zoning text amendment, 2014-01. It's statutory changes of procedures for the Board of Adjustment, and it's based on some legislature from last year. And so the town's required to update our ordinance based on the adopted legislature. You have in your packet a memo from Attorney Messick outlining the changes as well as a draft ordinance. And then in the rear, I copied that portion of the Planning and Law Bulletin from last year, which kind of highlights the changes that were incorporated into the legislation.
Mayor, I believe y'all need to vote on going into a public hearing.
Make a motion that we go into public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None, so we are now in public hearing.
So everything I just said.
Okay. Yeah, that's the extent of your
Yes, sir.
comments,
Yeah,
okay,
and,
okay.
Mr. Messick would care to elaborate.
Only if you all have questions, and we can do that later.
I don't have any questions about the ordinance or the concept that we're talking about here. I am curious as to whether or not we've had any interest in the clerk's office about people volunteering to serve in this capacity.
I've received 1 application so far.
And as I got out of my car this evening, I was on the phone with another applicant who was on our website filling out the application.
And I also have someone's filling out the application.
Okay, but it sounds like we need, I don't know whether the board needs to rattle the bushes to encourage some the appropriate skill sets of our citizens to help in this regard, or what we need to do, but
And I've also been trying to reach out to people.
Mr. Bruce, maybe we can also put on the Facebook page.
And I've got one more that I'm
Okay, well, perhaps as a board, we can help the staff by talking to people who we think would be well suited to that role, so that's all I'll try to do this time. Okay,
Well, I've got a question for Mr. Messick. He and I were exchanging an email today on this, and my question that I posed was, does the statute allow for board members of this board to serve in the capacity of the Board of Adjustment? And the answer is yes. This ordinance, however, does have a section that says no elected officials will serve.
That can be my recommendation.
So the statute allows it, but this proposed ordinance would
Correct.
prohibit that.
But
So,
you, provided you could not serve by yourself, you have to have at least 1 ETJ member.
got it.
So it
Right.
would not really be the same thing as board commission.
Right. And well, and I'm thinking that if we are actually having trouble filling that role, and there are members of this board that want to serve, then I think we should leave that option open.
are some good reasons why you might want to distance yourself from a decision by the Board of Adjustment.
Right.
It would be hard to appeal from a Board of Adjustment decision if you were a member of it.
Correct. Yes.
So to prevent that awkward situation,
Mm-hmm.
if you restrict yourselves to say that you shall not serve, then it makes it easier. It's clear.
Right.
But, you know, we can change it if that's what you want.
Well, again, I only read the thing recently, but if I understood correctly, the Board of Adjustment is given pretty substantial powers to make rulings on things that does not require the concurrence of this board. Is that correct?
Right.
And appeals of their decisions, I thought, went to the court system.
It does, but you as the Board of Commissioners could appeal from a decision of the Board of Adjustment.
To the courts.
Right.
Okay. What's your, what do you want?
I'm just putting it out, I don't think we're voting this evening, I think it's public information, so I'm just making an observation that that is in the ordinance, the statute doesn't require the prohibition, so just something for us all to consider.
So we have time to think about that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I have one question. It says on the composition of regular members shall reflect the town's population to the ETJ. What are we standing at right now with ETJ members versus town members?
I don't know that. I think the planner might be able to dig that up.
The ordinance spells out as 3 and 2, 2 from the ETJ.
2 from the ETJ?
Yeah.
It was based upon the population estimates of the in-town and whatever's in the ETJ.
Right.
I find it difficult to get a population estimate for the ETJ, except by using the Center Township. Not all the Center Township is in the ETJ, but there's like 5,900 people altogether in the township. I'm not sure what the town's population is, but I saw 3,800.
So we're going to still go with these numbers pretty close. 3 and 10.
You don't have to deal with 5.
Beg pardon?
You don't have to deal with 5 with 3 and 2.
Okay.
You can have more if you want.
Okay.
But if you can't find 5, I don't know how you're going to find more. But,
You never know.
Any other questions on this before we move to the next item? Okay, if not, are we in public hearing for the second item as well, or do I need to close?
You can stay.
Stay in public hearing, okay. Next item up for public hearing is proposed annexation designated A2014-1, Chatham Park Investors.
Yes, sir. This is annexation associated with the medical office building, whose site plan we've reviewed and approved at the last meeting. And essentially, this is a housekeeping detail. It incorporates that portion of the approved site plan that wasn't already within the corporate limits. So it's just that remainder, that 1.298 acres that's currently just outside the city limits. So it would include it and therefore make the site plan, the entire site plan, part of the town.
Okay, thank you. Again, we have no public speakers signed up to comment on this item. Any questions from the board? If not, thank you, Mr. Bass. Do I hear a motion to go out of public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're out of public hearing on that matter. That brings us to our first item of new business, which is to hear a presentation from Mr. Sullivan of the Chatham County Planning Department.
Well, good evening. I was invited here tonight by the manager to give you a presentation on our conservation subdivision regulations, and I had provided a similar presentation to the Chatham Conservation Partnership in the spring. So And in 45 minutes of that meeting, I won't drone on that long tonight. I understand you've got a lengthy agenda and want to get through that. But I will go through some of the highlights, so I'll quickly go through some of the slides, and I understand you have a hard copy at your desk as well.
Can you turn the lights down just a little bit?
Do what?
Can you turn the lights down just a
Right
little bit?
behind you, Jason, there's two switches, just hit the close one, there you go.
Okay. So again, I'll cover the conservation subdivision regulations. I do have I'll go through a few slides that cover some of the items that we currently have in our subdivision regulations as well. Let's see. So first off, we've got a copy of the zoning map pulled up just to give you an idea. Y'all are all familiar with the county. Salt City and Pittsboro have rather large extraterritorial planning jurisdictions. We also have a portion of the town of Cary in the northeastern part. So those three jurisdictions, you all handle your own land use regulations, including subdivisions. We also have the town of Goldston, and we do handle land use regulations for the town. Right now, we only cover subdivision and watershed regulations for the town. So the remainder of the area, everything I'm going to talk about tonight, covers all the areas in the county. We're partially zoned county, but we do have subdivision regulations that are county-wide. So even though we're probably 2/3 unzoned, we still regulate land use as well as land use through other regulations. We just don't regulate zoning. Let's go back. We go back one. So of the types of major subdivisions, we have different options for developers whenever they come to the office. Our basic subdivision option is a standard subdivision. It's a 4-part process. It was revised in 2008. It was a 3-part process. The way it currently operates, the Board of Commissioners only see a major subdivision one time. After it's approved, that initial approval, what's called the first plat stage, the remainder of the project is now reviewed and approved by staff, and that includes the final plat. So we will sign off as staff on the final plat. But for a standard subdivision, basically all the property is cut up into lots. You have your roads that are cut in. Depending on the watershed or zoning district, we require anywhere from an acre to a 5-acre minimum lot size. We do extract out what are called riparian buffer areas, floatable areas. So those areas don't count to what we call the usable area of the lot. So you have to have one, depending on the watershed or zoning district, at least 1 acre of buildable area or usable area on the property, and it can range to 5 acres in some areas. So that's just our first kind of cut for subdivision. Another option we have, can you get back one? Yeah, that's fine. We have planned unit developments. We have several of these that are in the county. In the zoned areas of the county, this requires a conditional use permit, which is a quasi-judicial proceeding, which I'm sure you're familiar with. In the unzoned areas, we also have an option through our subdivision regulations for planned unit development. It allows the developer a lot of flexibility with a minimum lot size, and we do have an open space set aside that is also included as part of that approval. And this planned unit development is the parks at Meadowview, so this is off of Old 87, but there are several projects that fall under this for the county. Going backwards now. You want to advance it, Brian? I'm going the wrong way now. Another option we have is a compact community option. We actually have a separate standalone ordinance for the compact communities. We only have one that's been approved in the county at this point, and that's Briar Chapel. So there are a number of items that are included in the compact communities ordinance, and I won't go into all the details. We do have a 30% open space requirement, but there's also a limit on the built-upon area, and this includes the residential components. So there's a 24% built-upon area cap. Another provision of the compact communities option is you're allowed up to 2 dwelling units per acre. So that allows more residential development than we would allow through any of our other zoning processes. And then the fourth option we have is its conservation subdivision option. So this was adopted by the Board of Commissioners in 2008. We haven't had any submittals under this option until this year. We actually had 2 submittals that have been approved by the Board of Commissioners. It follows that same 4-step process that we have outlined in our standard, kind of our standard subdivision option. And I'll go through kind of the specifics of how this works for the conservation subdivisions. So first, this just gives you an outline as part of our subdivision regulations, and the intent is to encourage preservation of large contiguous blocks of property in the county that are called conservation space. So the conservation space language is embedded in the subdivision regulations. There's also a separate standalone set of subdivision guidelines that accompany that. And that document, and we'll go over this in a few more slides, but that document, the purpose is to help define what needs to be preserved in that conservation space. As far as the standards, you have to have a 40% set aside. So if you've got 100 acres, a minimum of 40 acres has to be set aside as conservation space. That 40% set aside is then broken down further. A minimum of 80% of that 40% has to be left as natural space. So that natural space is basically areas that are set aside, left undeveloped, basically. And then you can have 20% of that 40, the overall 40% set aside that can be used for recreational facilities or other options. So there's more flexibility with that little bit of a balance that's left over. And again, you've got the definitions for the natural space and open space. In deciding what areas are set aside, the subdivision guidelines, those got separate standalone guidelines that were adopted by the Board of Commissioners, outline how to prioritize what is set aside. So the developer has to work within those guidelines to identify the best areas for preservation. And the intent there is that the developer, when they come in, they can't just set aside all the property that works for development. They do need to evaluate the property and evaluate what the county considers to be the highest and best value open space on the property, and then that's set aside. And then those features are identified on a map that's actually submitted at what's called the first plat stage, that is submitted to the Board of Commissioners when they're reviewing the project and approving it. In addition to in the conservation space or conservation subdivision guidelines, there's a provision that at least 50% of the conservation space has to be contiguous, and the board had a concern that you could have a developer that might look at a site and just have fragmented pieces of conservation space. And the overall goal ultimately is if you can have a series of conservation subdivisions potentially adjoining, you can link up these conservation space areas and maybe have larger blocks that are preserved over time. So that was the thought of having it the 50% contiguous, with the intent that hopefully those could string along at some point if you have more conservation subdivisions. We've got a list of the permitted uses that are allowed in the conservation space. And this again, some of this goes to the 80% area, some of it is 20% of that overall 40% set aside. There are uses that are clearly prohibited that are outlined in the regulations. And there's also a requirement that there has to be permanent protection of that required conservation space. So it can't just be set aside with the intent that hopefully nothing will happen. We do have to have a legal document that's recorded before the final plat's recorded, or accompanied with the final plat that actually sets aside that conservation space. And it's open as to how that's done. So the county could take over part of that. If State Parks has an interest in it, depending on where it is, you could have an outside agency that takes over that conservation space for management, or it can just stay with the homeowners association. But there does have to be a document with a restrictive covenant outlining, one, how that property can be used, and then setting it aside perpetuity.
Jason, is there a minimum dimension for space considered qualifying as contiguous?
As far as whether it's like a narrow strip?
Yeah.
No, we didn't. It doesn't get to that level.
Okay.
Since the Board of Commissioners ultimately retains the right to deny the application, we still kind of have that buffer, but there's nothing that says you have to have a certain width that would, connect the contiguous pieces. As far as the standards, the incentive for a developer entering into a conservation subdivision is the density bonus. So that's an option that's not available through our standard subdivision process. So for a developer to enter into a conservation subdivision, automatically they're granted a 10% density bonus. If they're setting aside areas that are what are called bona fide farming operations, you can get an additional 5% bump. And the way the regulations are set out, you can have a piece of property that may be it may be currently managed for hay. So you may have a farmer that's got some fields, they're raising hay on it or growing hay. It doesn't require that continue to be on ongoing operation, but if the intent is that for a certain amount of time that somebody's going to continue to use it, that's fine. But there is a provision that if the bona fide farm operation ceases to exist, at least that area has to be set aside as part of the conservation space. It'll just go back to what's called the natural space. It'll just grow up and become undisturbed. The density calculation for determining how the lot yield is allocated, we take the base density based on whether it's the zoning or watershed regulations to determine what the minimum lot yield is. then the developer has to subtract out all the unusable areas. So the riparian buffer areas and floodable areas have to be taken out of that overall calculation. And then they run the numbers of, what's the yield if you end up, you got 100 acres, you take out 20 acres per floatable or streams, then the remaining 80 acres is what we'll then use to calculate if it's 1 dwelling unit per acre. They've got 80 units, and then they run the calculation for the density bonus on top of that. We don't remove road right-of-way. For like our planned unit development option, the developer does have to subtract the road right-of-way before they run their calculation on their lot yield. For conservation subdivisions, there is kind of an additional incentive because the road right-of-way is included. So they do get a little bit of an additional increase depending on how large the property is. And then dimensional requirements through the conservation subdivision option, no minimum lot size, and then there's building setbacks are reduced. So that's another incentive for the developer.
Is the open space considered non-usable in calculation of density?
Yes, the conservation space that's set aside, no, the conservation space is left in.
Okay.
When this was adopted in 2008, there was a lot of discussion about whether or not the 40% area should be left in or should it be subtracted. And the board decided that to make it further incentivize someone to use this option, go ahead and leave the 40% in, and they'll get credit for that even though it's not going to be developed.
Can the floodplain and the riparian buffers qualify for the open space set aside?
They can.
Okay.
That was another item that was discussed in 08 is whether or not that could qualify. That has been left in. We'll see long term how that works. You could have a developer that sets aside, if they've got a lot of floodable, they could set aside that 40%. It may all be floodplain. So you could end up in a situation where we wouldn't have allowed for that development, the development of that property anyway, but they're already getting credit for the bonus. It was discussed, and the board, I think at that time, just said, let's leave it in as an option for the set aside. As far as road standards, you can have NCDOT roads. So for the county, we don't build roads, we don't maintain roads. So they're either NCDOT or they're private. We do have a county standard for how a private road has to be constructed in the subdivision regulations, so the developer has to at least meet that minimum. And an additional incentive for the smaller projects, for the county, minor subdivisions are up to 5 lots. So those are handled administratively. Lynn Richardson is our subdivision administrator. Anything 5 lots or less, she will address those, and we can sign off on those in-house. Anything greater than that is a major subdivision. But to incentivize folks to use the conservation subdivision option, we can administratively approve up to 15 lots as part of a conservation subdivision. And this is just a spec, that was just a spec of the county standard private road, so we've got a spec built into the subdivision regulations. And then we've had, as I said earlier, we've got 2 projects that have been approved this year under the conservation subdivision process. This is the steel track. This is actually owned by Newland Communities. It's actually adjoins Briar Chapel on 3 sides. So this will connect to Briar Chapel. It will basically be seamlessly integrated into Briar Chapel, but it is a separate project from an approval standpoint. And then I've got some of the specifics, 131 acres, the 127 lot yield on this. And it's hard to see from the screen. If the areas in tan are the minimum required conservation space areas by the ordinance, and it includes, as we discussed previously, you can see there's some riparian buffer areas that are included in that conservation space. This development also took advantage of the bona fide farm exemption. There was a timber management plan in place on this property that's still in place, and the areas that are in tan theoretically can continue to be timbered. And since that is a bona fide agricultural use, they did get the 5% additional increase on top of the 10% that's already allowed. This project also has additional open space that the developer is setting aside. It's not encumbered under the conservation space. It's a little harder to see, but it's the areas that are outside the lots. You can see some of the trails that are running through some of those areas. So this is just a good example of our first project we went through the process. This is on county water, and then it'll be on a private wastewater treatment system. And the next one, this is the retreat at Haw River. The Board of Commissioners actually approved this last week. This is a large project. This property actually was under a conditional use permit for what we call standard development. It was going to be cut up into 5, roughly 2 acre size lots, all of it, the entire property. With the economic downturn, the developer put the project on hold. There was some infrastructure that had already been installed, but they hadn't and they had received final plat on some of this, so there were some lots that were platted and recorded, but they hadn't sold any of the lots. The developer reevaluated everything based on the economic downturn, and then looking at the conservation subdivision options, and they actually rezoned the property back to what it was originally zoned prior to their zoning approval for the prior project, and entered into this conservation subdivision option. 646 acre tract. It's a beautiful piece of property. It was approved for 395 lots, and then conservation space, the minimum was 258 acres, and they set aside an additional 169 acres. So that was voluntarily done by the property owner. And this project is off of Bynum Ridge Road, and you can see the Haw River on the lower portion of the screen. It's got over 3,000 feet of frontage along the Haw River. It also adjoins property owned by state parks. And the developer, they actually, when they presented this to the county, they had said, we want to set aside all this property along the river. We don't see this as, we don't see that, they didn't see that as the highest and best use for having developed lots next to it. They really were interested in preserving what they saw as the best features on the property. They've also concentrated the development on one side of the project. There's actually, Pokeberry Creek runs through this project, so they've concentrated everything on one side. This is also on county water, and they will install a private wastewater treatment plant, so that'll serve this project. So this is what the board intended in 2008 is really, we started kind of seeing the fruits of that. And you can see that with the flexibility, a lot of small lots in here, so the developer has a lot of flexibility with the layout and design. They also have a lot of flexibility with the lot size, which I think has really helped when the developers have looked at this, because they've not stuck with having an acre or 5 acre size tract. They can get below that and have smaller lot sizes. In this particular development, they've approached the county about taking over some of the conservation space, so that may or may not happen. If not, they may approach some other outside agencies, or it may just be retained by the homeowners association. And that is all I had for the presentation. So that's just a quick rundown. There are a lot of details that are behind all of this, but so far with the 2 projects we've had this year, we've learned a lot, but it actually worked pretty well. We didn't see any major problems with the regulations working through these 2 projects. So there may be some minor tweaks that we want to take back to the Board of Commissioners, but as far as the process worked, it has worked really well. And so far, we'll see how things turn out on the ground, and hopefully there'll be some successful projects. So if you have any questions for me?
Well, how long of a process is there to get, well, you said stage 1?
Yeah,
is the preliminary plat, I guess.
To get that first approval. One of the things that changed in 2008, we had a 3-part process for subdivision approvals. All 3 parts had to be reviewed and approved by the Planning Board and Board of Commissioners. Under our new process, there are 4 parts to it. The first component, the developer has to have a community meeting. The county is not involved in that meeting at all. And it's intentional. We don't want to be involved. It gives the developer an opportunity to meet with the neighbors. They have to mail a letter to all the adjoining property owners within 400 feet. They have to post a sign that they're holding a hearing or holding a meeting, and they can hold it wherever they want to, whenever they want to. They just have to hold that meeting for that concept, what's called a concept plan. So they have a layout, they provide it to the neighbors, they can make changes if they want to based on that. Once that's done, they then submit their application to the county for what's called first plat approval. So there's the lead time on how long that takes is kind of up to the developer. They do have to hold the community meeting, that's kind of up to them. So there's probably at least a 1-month time frame that they need to work in if they're running it really tight to have the community meeting and then submit it to the county. They do require an environmental impact assessment be submitted for projects that have more than 50 lots. There's a 2-month window for the submittal and peer review of that. So that precedes the submittal for the first plat. Once the first plat application is submitted, it's 45 days prior to the planning board meeting. The planning board holds a public hearing on it, and then they can make a recommendation the same night. So 45 days from the date of application to the planning board, and then just the way our process works, they would go to the Board of Commissioners the next month. So for our planning board, we're having a planning board meeting next week, September 2nd. So if we had a project for them to review, they made a recommendation next week. It would not go to the Board of Commissioners until their October meeting, and that's just a scheduling issue. So you're looking at, from the time of the submittal until approval by the Board of Commissioners could be 2 months. And it could be longer depending on if the planning board, they may want to continue the meeting. And then the Board of Commissioners has 4 meetings to make a decision on the first plat.
So that's a lot more efficient than trying to do rezoning and to get greater density without having to go through.
Yeah, one of the things that we've seen with the 2 that were submitted, if we had not had the conservation subdivision option, these would have been planned unit development. So we would have had the conditional use permitting on top of the subdivision. So we would have had 2 processes running simultaneously. With the conservation subdivision option, because it's subdivision, there's no quasi judicial hearing, there's no zoning component to it. It just goes through the subdivision process. And then once that's done, once the first plat's approved, again, it's all administrative review and approval. We have a technical review committee that meets monthly for the county. So our next step is what's called the construction plan approval. For that approval, the developer, they have to go and obtain all the regulatory permits, so that may take them months. If they have to get water and sewer approvals from the state, that can take 6, 8, 10 months. We've got one project that was approved by the board last week. It's not a conservation subdivision, but it's a well and septic subdivision, 20 lots. And we met with the engineer today, and he thinks within a few months he'll be ready to submit for construction plan because it's fairly straightforward. He just has to get his permits from NCDOT, sedimentation and erosion control. We have approximately 1 month window from the time of submittal until the TRC meets to review it. But once that review is done, the next day, if everything's in order, Lynn can send an email to the developer saying you're ready to start construction. And then final plat approval is the same, about a month from the time that they submit. Could be a little bit shorter. We just have the technical review committee review everything, and then if everything's in satisfactory order, we work with the county attorney if there are any bonds that need to be put in place. But other than that, we just sign off as staff.
On average, how many rounds of review and submittal are you experiencing?
For construction plan?
Yeah.
We've got a couple of projects that are under the new regulations. West Falls one, that was a project that started out under the old regs, went through the economic downturn, bankruptcy and all that. It's under our new regulations, and the construction plan submittals on those, we've just had 1 TRC meeting. And it's been reviewed and everything's been in order, and we've been, within the next day or 2, been able to approve it.
Mm-hmm. Is that average, or is that?
That's West Falls is the only project under the new regulations.
Okay.
We now have 3 more that have been approved, but we haven't gotten to that construction plan stage. So hopefully, as long as the engineer for the construction plan, if they have to have all the regulatory permits. If there are any problems with those permits, there's probably a bigger problem that's not going to be resolved in a meeting or 2. But because you've got potentially county water, if they've got a private wastewater treatment system, there's a whole series of permitting for that, 401 and 404 permits from the state before. So all that has to be taken into account, so hopefully all that's been taken care of. And it should have been, with the first plat, we require a lot of detail, so there's not going to be much deviation from that plan. So as the developer's moving forward with the permitting, they have a good guide of what that outline's going to look like for doing their design.
So that first plat has a high level of construction thinking documentation.
Yeah, it doesn't, right, it doesn't require detailed construction drawings, but the developer's got to put a lot of thought into the layout and design. If not, there are some catches in the review process. If, as staff, we think there are substantial changes when they submit construction plan, we can kick it out and just say, you've got to go to the Board of Commissioners. The changes are too substantial for us to review. But that's worked pretty well. With one of our projects with Westfall, we did recently have a situation that came up where they've started doing more of the detailed design and realized that they could realign some roads and configure things a little bit differently, more efficiently, and we reviewed that as staff and said that's fine. It was less roadway, it didn't seem to be an impact to adjoining property owners, so we didn't see a problem with that, the way that the regulations are outlined and adopted. So we'll see how it moves forward. Now that we'll have 3 additional projects moving through the process, we'll probably within a year or 2 have a better handle on how things are working. Anything else?
Any other questions?
No, I'd just like to say I think that I really love the concept of the conservation subdivision. I'd love to see the town consider adding something like that to our tool belt as well. I wondered what everybody else's thoughts are on that.
Not to, Fred is familiar with a lot of that too.
I like that also.
Mhm.
I do, I like that.
It seems like it also just makes it so much simpler. If there's a developer that wants to have conservation space to not have to go through the whole process that Chatham Park had to go through, and no rezoning, everything is spelled out, and it just seems like it would save a lot of time, and at the same time get some density. And also, as our town grows, it'd be nice to have some areas that are left for conservation. Even as it gets dense around it, it's always nice to have some parks here and there. So,
Well, now's a good time to do that since we're right in the UDO.
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea.
yeah, it could be part of the UDO. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
And it's more efficient too. I was thinking about with sidewalks and roads, there's less maintenance long-term. You've got more dense development and open spaces, less dead long-term roads and sidewalks.
Very good. Especially conservation, you don't have to worry. It's very good.
Okay, our next order of business is wastewater treatment plant major permit modification. Mr. Royal is going to present. You might want the lights to stay off, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'll do that. Good evening, pleasure to be here. This item is kind of two items in one. They're interrelated. The first one is the award of or approval of the wastewater treatment plant modification that essentially doubles the capacity of the effluent into Robeson Creek. And I don't remember the date of that, but it's in your letter there. The second one is kind of taking that permit mod and doing what is typically done, where you start doing a planning for an upgrade. And we were fortunate that we competed with some other municipalities in North Carolina with a student group, if you will, from NC State to do essentially a engineering quality preliminary engineering report. There's a few caveats to it because it's a fast track. It's a 1 semester scope of work. It's a senior engineering class at NC State, so they have until final exams in December to finish the report. So we have Randy has been influential in helping narrow the scope down, where they make sure they can get a quality job done for whatever it is they do. And with the assistance of Randy Hurd and some folks on the outside, which I can go into a little bit later, we've determined that the scope is only going to involve kind of the wet area of the plant, where the clarifiers are, where all the biological activity occurs, where the main, when you took your plant tour, you remember the two round tanks, those are the clarifiers. And that's where the biological processes occur to remove phosphorus and nitrogen and what have you. And that's kind of the guts of the wastewater plant. And so that's what they're going to concentrate on. And Randy and everyone at the plant and others believe that we can sort of work with whoever does the final design. This isn't a final design project. This is just a preliminary 30,000 foot review of the existing plant with alternatives. We're going to probably have up to 3 alternatives on where we can go from here. But no matter what, the other pieces that will be included back into this in the engineering, when we get to that stage in the future, will include the headworks, where all the wastewater comes into the plant with the grit separator. You probably recall we talked about having a more efficient or upgraded grit remover that helps maintain the pumps. And then on the back end, the solids component, where right now we're paying Synagro to remove our biosolids, and they spray them on fields, and so we're looking at some alternatives to recycle that as an alternative. But so the idea is this scope will not include the headworks with biosolids, but just the stuff in the middle. the stuff that really matters for permitting. So those two items are, I look at them as pretty positive news. The manager put in a number in the budget this past year in the capital improvements program of approximately $80,000 for this item. Not that we identified exactly where the funds are going to come from, but that's the ballpark cost of a kind of a low-end small plant PER value. So I'm just happy to report that we're getting a PER for no cost other than my time and Randy Hurd's time, and spending some time working with the students and some professors, and then a couple of consulting firms who work with the American Wastewater Association or Waterworks Association. So they're doing this as part of their outreach type of thing. And it's also going to be a state and national awards competition. So if they go far with it, then Pittsboro will be splashed up on screens around the country, and who knows where it'll lead. But that's the gist of this item tonight. So where we are in the process, I believe you have a scope before you from the AWWA folks. We're actually planning to meet with them September 2nd at the wastewater plant to kind of kick off the scoping, to answer questions. And I've also been able to secure the no-cost services of the North Carolina Rural Water Association, who has been helping us over years with John Petit's crew with the smoke testing, what have you. The gentleman's name is Dwight, and I cannot remember his last name at this moment, but he's agreed to assist us as kind of a separate set of eyeballs. He's got 30 years of experience in wastewater, and he's agreed to sort of help us participate in this process with his background. He's very familiar with all the wastewater plant technologies that exist out there, and especially the small municipal size that are different animal than the Durhams and the Charlottes. So it's a little bit of different. So it's our advantage that we have this assistance. So that's that item in a nutshell. Happy to answer questions or have a conversation about it.
Any questions from board members? Hey, Fred, I was wondering if, as the students approach the completion of their project in December, will somebody be coming here to present a report, or are they going to present it to you and then you present it to us, or how's that going to work at the end game?
I'm envisioning the end game where they'll also practice their skills at public speaking, so they'll be here with the full-on presentation, and we'll all get copies of the report, and we'll help them. We'll hold their hand as needed, but this is their senior project, so they'll be here.
Okay, just as a time management thing, you might want to let them know that we only have one board meeting in December, and that the end of their semester might not dovetail exactly with our meetings in December.
Thank you for that.
So yeah, if they don't finish till middle or late December, I don't know when their Christmas break starts, but you might want to warn them when our only board meeting is in December, so that there isn't a oops there.
Okay, thank you.
I would think that their finals are probably going to be in early December.
So they probably don't need to be done about then anyway, but
End of November, maybe.
Probably the end of November, somewhere in that time slot. They'll be hustling to get
Pressure
their
on.
final spreadsheets finished and formatting and what have you.
Well, I think we should probably spring a different deadline on them just to give them real life experience.
We'll talk to them on it next week in September when I'll let them know it's going to be a fast. They know it's a fast track, but I'll look at the December date.
yeah, just don't schedule it in January, because they will already have got their grade and they won't care
Yeah.
anymore.
Half of them are probably graduating, so looking for work.
So Fred, do we think this is going to be, other than obviously staff time, cost-free? The mentoring that is mentioned in here with local engineering firms, we anticipate that's being donated?
It is.
Okay.
It's part of the AWWA competition. And we, like I said earlier, we were actually competing for this service with a couple other municipalities in the state, so we were really happy to hear that Randy and I got together and really sold it. Tried to, so it worked out. So I think they were attracted to the fact they were a small facility and they felt like they could wrap their heads around it a little closer. So, I don't know. I don't believe we're going to enter any formal contracts or anything like that with it because there's no monies going back and forth. But
Well, maybe if I could hop on to your question, if this is your question, great. If not, my question, I guess, some of what I would be concerned about, and I apologize for springing this on you right now, is if there was input from, say, hydrostructures or something like that, how is the AWA arrangement accounting for that somehow, or is that something that we would be responsible for when you're talking about?
I think if we want to ask if hydrostructures wanted to participate in a review mode that essentially is not under a contract, it's just under a review mode, or if we wanted to retain their services, I'm sure that's possible. We can talk about that with the group. The Rural Center's got a pretty good background in this. The gentleman, I couldn't remember his last name, I talked to him at length on the phone last week, and he was interested, and he gave me a laundry list of plants he's done, so I felt pretty comfortable talking to him about that, but again, hydrostructures or anyone else who wants to comment.
No, I mean, if say, for instance, there was a question about our system or previous projects or things like that, and say we couldn't get the answer.
Right.
We'll have to, we can work that out.
I have sort of a tangentially related issue I'd like to bring up just briefly here, and that's some months ago when I was at a mayors and chairs meeting with TJ Cog, I ran into Mayor Tom Stevens of Hillsborough, and in the course of that meeting, he mentioned that they had just cut the ribbon on a new wastewater treatment plant, and they didn't dwell on it. I didn't have a chance to ask him a lot of details about their experience, but I talked to him after the meeting and asked would he entertain a staff visit from Pittsboro for the folks that were interested in hearing about how their process started and how they funded it and how they got it designed and built and worked with the state and whatnot. And I have waited to mention until we got the finance officer position filled, because that's frankly the most interesting part of the process for me is how do you pay for that stuff. But if if the staff is interested, other board members are interested, I'll reach out to whenever everybody thinks it's timely to do so. And if nobody else is interested, I'll just go up there myself and meet with their engineers and finance folks and learn what I can. But just offer that up and sort of open the floor to questions. And when do people think that it would be most productive to do something like that?
I really don't have a wife, so you're still more critical.
Yeah, I'm kind of anxious to do it sooner rather than later. I don't think it necessarily, will have anything to do with the study that the NC State engineers are doing. But if I could arrange for that to happen in September, October, would folks be willing to participate? Yeah.
I would be willing
Like,
to, depending on when you schedule.
The timing and
Yes.
whatnot, yeah. What I'm envisioning is, perhaps a tour of of their new facility and maybe an hour sit-down meeting with their staff, or their engineer, their finance officer, just to, get a chance to hear, sort of a case study of how they got it done, and then have they give us a chance to ask questions. So it'd be an hour ride up there, a couple hours on scene, and an hour ride back to Pittsburgh. If everybody thinks that we could find time in September and October to do that, I'll reach out to Mayor Stevens, and I'm sure he'll be in contact with their manager, and then the two managers can work out the details. But that sounds like something would be worth doing. Okay, I'll take that one for action on myself then. Okay. Any other questions for Fred? Thank you,
Good
Fred.
job.
Yeah, thanks.
Very much.
Okay, let's see here. Do we need the lights back on there? I think we probably do. Now, we changed our agenda to move to old business, the item number 2 from the consent agenda, which is the approval of the sidewalk agreement with NC DOT. Commissioner Fiocco has some questions.
Yeah.
Give you the floor.
Thank you. I'm just, looking at this contract language, and it's interesting, and, that protects the DOT really well. And I'm just looking at some of the numbers. The maximum funding, and this would be subject to the availability of federal funds, is $26,400.
Yeah, it's 80/20.
Okay, so forgive me if I've forgotten this information. What's our cost estimate on this? This is for survey, design, and construction.
It's in the mid-30s,
Mid-30s.
and I would be the engineer of record, so we're
Okay.
saving about 10 there. And we would have survey, CAD work done, shop that out, and construction.
And-
There's no cookie cutter, just as an FYI.
Got it. So using the existing swale or modifying that?
Modifying the existing square.
Okay. Okay, that's, what's the length of this sidewalk? This piece?
I don't remember.
Would you hazard a guess?
200 and some odd feet,
200?
somewhere in there.
That seems like plenty.
From 87 to Farrell Street. That one, couple hundred feet.
Fred, I may overlook this also, is it planned for a crosswalk at the corner there?
Yes.
Good question.
Yes. There still remains the question of how that crosswalk ties over to the ball field side. There is a fire hydrant there, and so we're going to have to look at that closely, how that works. Because there's no improvements on the ball field side proposed in this, so it would pretty much dump you on the grass in the right of way, where you could walk down, and then there's that one safe crossing in front of the elementary school. So it all has to be ADA compliant, and with a safe crosswalk with all the signage and everything like that.
What about on the 87 end down there at what is it, Austin Chapel Church Road?
Mm-hmm.
Are we having a crosswalk there?
No.
No.
No, the idea is this would continue around the corner from the R87 bypass
Right.
sidewalk. It wouldn't be designed to cross.
Well, not the sidewalk, I was just concerned about the people on Thrift Street and back in there that could cut, of course, it wouldn't be a sidewalk on that side of the road, but they could get to the corner there at a safe crosswalk.
Right. We could talk to DOT because they're the contract negotiator on this, and I frankly requested at some point in the near future a meeting with DOT about that intersection in particular. The couple things are going on, not only the sidewalks, but the Robeson Creek Bridge replacement is going to happen beginning this winter. So they're going to shut down the whole road and bypass them around. Was it old Golston Road, and then that intersection is going to become pretty interesting. If you can imagine all that truck traffic.
Yeah.
So we have to talk about that with DOT, and so that crosswalk can come up.
All right, thanks.
Yep.
Be another good time for that truck route, wouldn't it? Get that right.
I'd be happy to invite you to the meeting.
That's
Great, thank you, Fred.
Sure.
Okay, I guess we have to go back and take whatever action was requested on that item.
Well, I make a motion that we authorize the execution of the sidewalk agreement.
Second?
All in favor?
Second.
All any opposed? And the authorization is passed. Yes. Let's see here. Yeah, Commissioner Baldwin raises a good point here on, we finished with Mr. Royal, but we didn't take any, the board didn't take any action. Do you require an action from us other than, her?
Yes, I just,
Motion to approve the project with the AWWA at North Carolina State University to perform preliminary engineering report.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed, and that is approved. So we're authorized to go ahead with that. Okay. Thank you for picking up on that. Okay, I believe that brings us to the manager's update on capital projects.
thanks, Mr. Mayor, and my apologies for not including a written brief in your packets. I'll keep my comments brief tonight as well. I sent out an email earlier that the retreat, the board retreat or re-retreat is confirmed with Dr. David Long for September 29th on Monday from 4 to 8 p.m. So at this point in time, we're planning on having department heads there as well, unless we hear otherwise. So if that's still a go, it's still a go from our end. So. Paving, asphalt will be repaving in the locations that we discussed earlier the week of September 15th. And as indicated, we'll get out and notify people as best as we can, hopefully before the trucks show up. We're also looking at an option. Our bids came in. I think we had originally budgeted $111,000 approximately with change, based on the pavement condition survey that we had done previously. We budgeted around 111, and the bids came in somewhere in the neighborhood of 86 from Raleigh Paving. So we're going to take a look at a couple of options on Hank Street from Hillsborough to Credo. There's a number of about 12 different spots that Raleigh Paving identified that they could go down 2 inches and patch and then pave over. So we're working with them on that, and we should be able to, the estimates that we're playing around with, we have budgeted in the overall project amount for the Powell bill allocation that we plan on using this year. So we'll keep you posted about that as well. Another thing we brought up at a previous meeting is that, as you'll recall, I think we're pretty well squared away with emergency generating power at the water treatment plant and the wastewater plant through those recently completed projects. And thanks to staff for that. I think there was one item also too that we probably want to consider, and that's down at the Haw River intake, the actual intake apparatus itself. If the real world implication with that is that if we were to lose power for any length of time, we would be able, through emergency generating power, be able to actually distribute the water from the water treatment plant. So the water that's already been out there, stored, collected, treated, could then be sent out to the public. But if an event caused us to be without power for even more length of time, we would have difficulty actually taking in water at the Haw River intake and then pumping I explained that Mr. Engineer properly. I struggle with these things sometimes, but your deadline, we mentioned that we were going to be looking into this grant. Our deadline is coming up this Friday,
September 1st.
September 1st. Unless anyone has any issues, we're going to explore that grant project and then come before you should we need to formalize anything on that.
Do we have any idea what size we may need there? Generator size down there?
As far as the generating size, getting
KW, I mean, what?
We're planning on two 200 horsepower pumps in the future. So it's going to be enough for that, and I don't know how many KW at this point. I'm waiting to get all that back, hopefully tomorrow. With all the other electrical, the automatic transfer switch, and all those items. So we have to incorporate the cost estimate in our letter of intent. So I'm waiting to hear back on that.
Are those pump 3-phase?
Yes.
Yeah, I think as generators go, this will be a fairly small one. It's probably 2 pretty good sized 3-phase motors and a few lights and whatnot down in the building.
Yeah, and I don't know the size of the kilowatts that they can handle, but it's, the idea is that this grant will pay 100% cost.
Perfect. Be through North Carolina
Emergency management.
So we'll have more to report on that shortly. And then the other item I would update on, speaking of sidewalks, we're looking at opening bids on the East Street sidewalk project on this Thursday, the 28th. So we should be able to have a good idea for how much we'll actually be able to do with that. We're kind of cautiously optimistic that we should be able to do the entire length of the project. If not, we may want to revisit some options on that, or if we want to go ahead and get it done using Powell bill money, or if we just want to work in part of it. So we'll have more to report on that as well. And I guess also too, in your packet, you received a letter from DOT that shows that we were formally approved for the first 4 items in the downtown visioning process. Those being some of the proposed improvements around the traffic circle. Still waiting for what our next steps are from DOT, and we'll let you guys, let business owners know what's happening with that, so you know something. And have a couple other projects that we're working on that we've discussed most recently that I'm trying to make a little bit of hay on. And so it's going to be a busy fall. And with that, I'll tap out. If you have any questions, we'll do our best.
Yeah, I have a quick question on the retreat. We've, I don't know what the will of the board is here. We've agreed to come and have a meeting from 4 to 10 and 4 to 8. Are we gonna, everybody gonna bring your own lunch, or do we have an expectation that we'll get fed while we're here, or we bring some crackers in our pockets, or bring your own? Okay, bring your own lunch. Okay. Just so I didn't want to.
4 to 8, that's dinner.
Yeah.
We've provided dinner, white dinner before on these occasions, but it's farewell.
Yeah, that's, I just didn't want you to have no guidance on the matter, but if everybody's happy to just bring some crackers in your pocket, that works for me.
I mean, we can put out a cheese ball or something like that, just to keep people off the edge.
I think I hear everybody saying they don't need it, so.
Okay.
Okay. Just I didn't want to call you the night before.
We're talking cheese ball.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't want to lay something on you the night before the thing and have to scramble around, but so we will all bring our own nabs and a Coke or something. Okay.
Or for supper.
Or we can go to Subway and bring it over here. Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Bruce, back in reference to the Pittsboro downtown vision plan, and I just wanted to make note, and I'm sure everyone noticed that they require, the funding schedule will require 20% match from the town. So I just wanted to.
Yeah, that was originally part of the deal.
Yeah, and so that's another one of the issues that I think I made a brief mention at last minute. That's one of the issues that we need to iron out with that. We haven't, I can tell you I personally haven't agreed to any sort of cost assumption from the town's perspective.
So when are they planning to give us that funding schedule?
Last month. So, I mean, I think there were some issues around the budget and kind of entering through that. And again, going back to the original conversation, this is a completely new deal for all of us. And so, I hate to say that, I hate to say that nobody knows anything at this point, but we're just trying to hammer through it as best as we can.
So is your understanding, I was under the impression that this was something that was going to go on for the next several years, but this doesn't mention that in the letter. Do you have reason to think that there'll be further grants down the road?
I've heard from DOT and other sources informally that they are anticipating continuing with our vision plan with other monies in the future. But for this first phase or this first step, this is the amount that's been allocated. And also too, slightly less formally, again, all verbal at this point, that we were given assurances that it would be a multi-step process. This first stage is to actually get the work designed, and come up with harder cost estimates, and then from there we would figure out, we being mostly DOT, but with our input and with the business's input, figure out where the money is coming from. And again, I'm working forward because this is what I was told originally, and you guys were told pretty much at the same meeting. I'm working forward on the assumption that the DOT is assuming responsibility for these improvements at this point until you're otherwise.
Yeah, that makes sense because all the improvements are on DOT highways, so I don't think they would want us managing that budget.
Yeah, it's not out of the realm of possibility that we saw this with the Hillsborough Street project when they were resurfacing. I mean, there are certain things that they would call betterments that maybe they don't feel that they would be responsible for paying for. And so if somebody down the line determines that task A or task B is a betterment, and task C fits within the scope of what they would normally do, nothing would surprise me. But it's my purpose is to represent the town here and make sure that the town is not left assuming any costs that we are not expecting or not budgeting to assume.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so with respect to mayoral and board member updates, there's a couple of EDC things going on this week. Tomorrow morning, the Triangle Community Coalition is coming to town for a coffee chat in the morning at the EDC offices, and I'll be attending that. Never met with this group before, so I'm not sure what to expect, but it's Triangle Community Coalition. And then Friday, there's a half-day EDC board strategic planning session that I'll be attending at the Briar Chapel Clubhouse.
When does that start?
That's at 8 o'clock.
Okay.
8 to about 10, 8 to 12:30. Okay. Anything on the RPO from any sector?
I'm happy to report that I was traveling on my route to the RPO meeting last week and had business pull me away from that meeting. So again, I was unable to attend.
Okay, anything from Solid Waste Advisory?
We actually are having a meeting on September 3rd.
Okay.
In the Dunlop classroom, which is behind the health department, at 6:13. And I think there's a presentation on a waste to energy innovation, so if anybody else wants to come. Hopefully we'll have enough people to have a meeting.
Any fairgrounds updates?
Yes, actually, there's the fairground. The fair is scheduled for September 18th, 2014. through September 21st, 2014. And we invite all of you all to come. It's a family-friendly fairground, and we anticipate a lot of rides, a lot of fun, and remember, it's a family-friendly fair. So we invite everyone, and if anyone wants to be a vendor or participate in that or bring any type of exhibits, you are certainly welcome to do that. And if you could connect it with our Pittsboro Facebook page, that would be great.
And maybe, Pam, you can send me some things about if people want to submit things for the exhibits, because I bet when it's a deadline for that. Okay, I think it's pretty close to the fair.
It's pretty close.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, anything from Downtown Association?
Yeah, the PBA is reporting very good attendance and receipts from First Sunday. So that is successful, and reporting that the truck rodeos are a success and bringing lots of people to town. And some of the shop owners are staying open late and saying they're seeing foot traffic, so it's a good sign. And I understand that Mr. Horn has received some final schematic drawings for the pocket park, and that reports are that he's pretty satisfied. I won't put words in his mouth, but having spoken with the designer, I understand that drawings were submitted the Friday prior, and then last week they had a really good meeting where they started to really crystallize the vision. So there we go. It's dark, but
It's kind of dark. So
yeah. But yeah, I think it's coming along. Yeah, it's very dark. Yeah.
Thanks.
So that tree on the left, is that existing big tree?
It is.
Oh, good.
Yeah, that one, and yeah, both tall trees are actually, the one close in the foreground is an old oak, and it could probably use some pruning. It's got some dead wood in it. The one in the back is a pecan tree, and it's got a pretty good canopy on it.
So will there be some kind of tribute to Paige Vernon somewhere in the park?
I think that's yet to be developed, but
Okay.
I think it should be.
Yeah.
I think we really want to coordinate with Jim and see what his ideas are on that.
I assume it'll be named after her?
I would like to think so too.
I would think so, yeah. Be nice to see.
I refer to it as Page Park.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, anything more on that?
That's it.
Commissioner concerns, Commissioner Farrell.
I don't have anything this time. I was just questioning about the funding for the 20% on this, and Pam took care of that, that's all.
Okay. Commissioner Foley?
I don't have anything right now.
Okay.
Two things. Spoke with Mr. Grusbeck earlier this week and understand that the county has adopted the erosion control request, and that, I forget, we're going through another process where I guess the state is certifying the county providing that service to us. So soon, erosion control in the town of Pittsboro will be permitted and inspected by the county, which is something we want to see happen.
In fact, it's already been done by the Sedimentation Commission. County staff, Dan LaMontagne, and myself went to the meeting in Raleigh, and we both spoke for 1 minute each, and they voted affirmative, unanimous. So from that day on, the wheels began to turn. So in fact, we had a staff meeting today with the county to go over a process. And basically the way they're going to handle existing permits that the state's permitted, they're going to hand them over to the county, and they're going to enforce, inspect, using the permits that they have from Diener, and not the Chatham County ordinance. So they have to remember which is which. They're setting up their files, and yeah, so they're off and running with Pittsboro officially.
Good. Yeah, that's good.
And so the first project's going to be coming soon. It's a retail spot behind Lowe's Home Improvement.
And I just wanted to know if we've done anything, been able to make any progress on an issue that came before the board last meeting about traffic calming options in Chatham Forest.
Yeah, I looked at some other options from other communities, and we're going to meet internally and decide how we want to tackle it. I gave a heads up to the board the last time that the other communities that have tackled similar problems or similar issues have passed on quite a bit of responsibility and cost for gathering information and assuming some of the cost for some of the speed control devices to, in most cases, HOAs.
Mm-hmm.
So, that may be a part of the recommendation as well.
It seems like we should take into consideration some streets, you don't want to have speed bumps if it's a major thoroughfare, so there may be some rules about which roads can and can't be have speed bumps. You know what I mean?
Agreed. I think they want to avoid having their street be one of those thoroughfares.
Right, but sometimes you got to have some thoroughfares, and so finding that balance and making sure it's clear, having it spelled out so that we can have a policy in place.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's almost like something, it should be part of the town engineering standard if we have one. I don't know that we've ever had one. Chapel Hill, they have a thick book that's the town engineering standards, and the traffic engineer has their own piece of it about when and where they're appropriate and what the design criteria are and that sort of thing. Rather than, rather than going down the road of just willy-nilly taking the request one at a time, and it makes sense to have a logical policy that can be applied. Anything else on that? Commissioner Ball?
I don't have anything other than Triangle J, a Triangle J Council of Governments meeting on Wednesday. If there's any issues, state or otherwise, or county or municipality connected, I can certainly bring those issues there and we can discuss those, but I do have that meeting Wednesday.
Mr. Turner?
I have a question, following
Okay.
the concern. Did we agree or say that DOT was gonna come back and assess 15501 around Northwood, that area? Like we were gonna wait till the school was back and do another traffic study? That sound?
I think we've had DOT look at that for traffic 2
But weren't
different
they gonna
times.
come back again in the fall?
So a third time?
Well, the reason I ask is today I was heading south and today was the first day of school and there were 2 sets of 4 kids running for their lives to Bojangles across the street. And this was like at 4 this afternoon. So.
I think what we decided was we might put in another request.
Oh, right.
Once
Okay,
school started.
Yeah.
Just to be very squeaky.
Now that I'm hearing.
Maybe we should wait till the medical office building is there and then we get a better shot at it. That was brought up on the Facebook page today. Someone talked about concerns about traffic. You're right there at Northwood and the medical office park and the Bojangles and all that.
I think this is the first time school's been in session with Bojangles open and they were
So just to
running
clarify,
across the road.
just to clarify your
Stoplight though.
intent, are you looking for another speed study or are we looking at something more detailed and different?
At some point a crosswalk there or something to help them safely get across the street because they're gonna go to Bojangles.
Okay.
So, does anybody recall, when did we last formally make a request to the DOT? Has it been over a year?
No.
No, it's been like
4 months.
I think we should wait.
And they said no.
Mike said we should wait till school's about out.
Yeah.
I believe Chief Crutchfield said something about that, wait till school back in session.
They check during the times when traffic is there. Because we talked about the possibility of not necessarily changing the speed limit all the time, but at least having certain hours that reduce speed. And that's something we haven't asked of them before, but during school hours. And that makes sense.
And then stagger it right, I think. About seeing if they can do something like that.
So that's a little different request, so that might get your attention a little more. Do you know if they actually come here, or do they just get on their computer and look at statistics?
Well, I mean, they don't necessarily do traffic counts, as a special event per se. I mean, they'll look at existing traffic counts, and they'll match that with an accident or safety evaluation of the stretch that we're asking for, which is what they've done in each case. And, if they were to actually do, I mean, you can take that a step further, and if you were to do a speed study, I mean, what they're doing is evaluating, I think in these cases, that we were evaluating whether or not it would warrant a speed that was reduced from what is currently posted at. I mean, if they were actually able to go out there and take a speed study, and calculate how much traffic is going out there, and then determine that traffic, that X percentage of that traffic traveled at a certain speed, and then use that to define what the speed should be, it's always going to be higher than what you guys want. I mean, that's always the way speed studies will calculate. So I think, and that's why I'm asking, is there something different that we want to do with this?
The difference is we're asking for a specific time period.
Yeah, and I don't know how they determine it. I don't know how they warrant that, and if anybody here knows how they do that. And I can certainly find out, and and we can see if there is something different, if they could recommend something different now, given the fact that we have Bojangles across the street. Is there some safety? Is there a safety device, or are there crosswalks, or are there some other bump outs or things like that they may feel are warranted? And I think that's probably a question that we should ask, in addition to taking a look at whether or not safety issues have changed in there since the last time we asked.
Do we want to expand, since we're coming back to the well so soon here?
I mean, I think I got a pretty good idea what you guys are looking for.
What I was going to suggest is we also keep getting the question about why isn't there a crosswalk from the cruisers to Lowe's, and it's
Oh, I see what you're saying.
If we're gonna inquire about that piece of 15501 from Lowe's up to the school stoplight, we might as well get them to look at that whole run there.
How do you get across that now?
Well, the last time we had them look at it, they said they came up and stood there and watched, and nobody ever tried to cross the street, so they...
Well, nobody crossed it because it's
yeah. So they said didn't appear to be a need for a crosswalk there.
Well, part of their argument was there was no sidewalk on both sides of the road, and I think that's a similar argument that would be made in Northwood.
That makes sense.
But from a Northwood perspective, I think they're very familiar and practiced at having school zones.
Right.
Where, okay, this is 55 every other hour of the day except for during these school hours, and maybe it gets knocked down to 35.
Yeah, call the school zone. That's good to throw in that language.
Yeah, and they do that all the time.
Yeah, we've all driven through those with the flashing light that says school time. Okay.
Because other times it's not bad through there.
No, it's not. Just doing school times.
No, when it's safe, it's safe.
Exactly.
When school's happening, it's not the safest.
But other than that, there's not that much slow traffic through there, except during school hours.
So just to clarify, are we asking the manager to write a letter to DOT to take a
Requesting
note?
the school zone.
Okay.
Let's don't call it another look, because we're asking, let's make it something different so they'll pay attention a little better.
Reduce speed due to school zone,
Call it
something like that.
You
know
can
how
say
to
installment
phrase
of
it.
a school zone.
Yeah, I think, I don't have to, I mean, last year I was driving in there every morning. Now it kind of makes me nervous because I'm not doing that anymore. If you follow me, someone else is driving that now.
Yeah.
And someone else is also going with her friends and going over to Bojangles,
Yeah.
So yeah, so I'm, I'll admit I'm kind of concerned about it. So I kind of got an idea of the types of movements that are in there and what you guys are concerned about. So I'll just work for it and see what we come up with.
Good.
Thank you. And was there one more there? Is that it? Okay.
I was going to mention, I sent you guys an email about this, but just information. I noticed, I found an article online that said that the shopping center across the street is being purchased by someone else. I don't know what the implications of that will be, but that's, right, currently, it's a big part of town.
So was it, I thought it was.
Piggly Wiggly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that'll be the thing.
So it's the whole shopping center, it's not just the grocery store?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I have no idea what that is.
Some of the commentary with Publix or Harris Teeter?
People are advocating, hopefully nothing will change, hopefully the businesses will be able to stay the same. And they have things that keep getting rid of away.
Okay. If we are finished with commissioners' concerns, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned.